Listen very carefully, because what I'm about to say isn't just advice. It's protection. It's soul armor. If you're a woman growing into her power, stepping into her truth, speaking from her intuition instead of her conditioning, then you will become a threat, not to everyone, but to the men who are still living in fear. And when a man fears a powerful woman, he won't say it outright. He won't tell you, "I'm afraid of your independence," or "your voice intimidates me," or "your self-respect makes me feel small." No, that would require self-awareness. Instead, he'll mask that fear behind 5 seemingly casual, common, socially acceptable phrases. But each one is a warning sign. Each one reveals a man who does not want to meet you at your level. He wants to drag you back down to it. And if you don't recognize these phrases for what they are, you will spend years watering yourself down just to make him feel comfortable in your presence. So let me walk you through them, not just the words, but the energy behind them, the intention, the ancient wisdom passed down through silence and scars that women have carried for centuries. Because you deserve to know the truth. And the truth is, your power doesn't make you hard to love. It just makes you impossible to control. But before I give you the first phrase, I want you to understand the psychology of fear in relationships. A man who fears your power isn't always loud. He's not always aggressive. In fact, many of them appear charming, supportive, even romantic at first, because fear doesn't always come across as anger. Sometimes it comes across as insecurity, wrapped in validation. It's a slow drip, a smile followed by a side comment, a compliment followed by a correction, a look of admiration followed by a request to tone it down. They want the shine, but only if it reflects back on them, not if it threatens to outshine them. And this is why you must learn to separate genuine connection from conditional approval. Now let's talk about the first phrase. It sounds innocent, even caring, but it's one of the most manipulative things a fearful man can say to a powerful woman. You don't need to prove anything. On the surface, it sounds like he's affirming you, like he sees your strengths and doesn't want you to overextend yourself. But listen deeper. In most cases, what he's actually saying, your ambition makes me uncomfortable. Your hunger makes me feel inadequate. Your fire reminds me of all the ways I haven't grown, and I need you to turn it down so I don't have to level up. This phrase is not encouragement. It's containment, because the truth is, powerful women don't move from a place of proving. They move from a place of purpose. And when a woman is finally aligned with her purpose, when she stops waiting for permission and starts speaking from her soul, that's when the fearful man gets triggered, because now he can't distract her with approval. He can't dangle affection like a reward for staying small. And so he hides behind phrases like "you don't have to prove anything." But what he really means is, "Stop growing. It's making me insecure." The second phrase, equally subtle, but it stings in a different way. He says, "You're intimidating," but not with reverence, not with awe. He says it like it's a flaw, like it's something you should apologize for. And here's the truth. He won't tell you. He's not intimidated by you. He's intimidated by the version of himself that feels inadequate around you. Because a man who's done the work, a man who respects feminine power, he doesn't call you intimidating. He calls you inspiring. He doesn't to his own so he can stand beside you. But the fearful man, he uses intimidating as a mirror to reflect his own unworthiness back onto you. And if you're not grounded in your truth, you'll start thinking it's your fault. You'll start asking questions like, am I too much? Should I soften? Should I dim my voice? You'll start managing his emotions instead of protecting your own energy. And this is the first step toward energetic self-abandonment. You stop taking up space because someone else hasn't learned how to expand. But let me be clear, a woman rooted in her power is not intimidating. She is awakening, and not everyone is ready to be awake. The third phrase, it's said with a smile, and it always comes after you speak your mind. Stand your ground, or assert a boundary. He laughs and says, "You're feisty." Now why is that a problem? Because it's a micro-dismissal. It's a way of reducing your power to a personality quirk. It's the language of trivialization. It turns your intellect into sass, your assertiveness into cuteness, your conviction into a character flaw. And suddenly, you're not seen as a woman with wisdom, you're a girl with an attitude. This is especially dangerous because it's often wrapped in affection. It feels like flirting, but it's actually erasure. It's a way to sideline your seriousness, to make your truth more digestible, to lower the voltage of your voice until he feels safe again. And if you laugh along, you may not even realize that you're participating in your own minimization, because the moment you let someone label your power as personality, you give them the right to ignore your message and focus only on your delivery. You could be delivering truth from the depth of your soul, and all he hears is, "You're cute when you're mad." But let me tell you something. Real love doesn't need you to be palatable. Real love meets you where you are and stays present through the intensity of your truth. If he calls you feisty when you're being clear, he's not listening. He's labeling, and that's not a partner. That's a distraction. In part 2, I'm going to walk you through the next two phrases that are even more insidious. One of them is designed to keep you emotionally invested in someone who has no intention of rising to meet you. And the other, it's the phrase that breaks more women than betrayal ever could, because it doesn't just target your behavior, it targets your evolution. Stay with me. What's coming next could be the very language pattern that's been holding your soul hostage without you realizing it. Now let's continue, because the next two phrases are even more dangerous than the first. They don't just chip away at your confidence, they rewire your belief about what love is supposed to feel like. These phrases are not always said with anger. Sometimes they come with a smile, a warm tone, a long embrace. That's what makes them so damaging. Because when a man fears a powerful woman, he doesn't always push her away directly. He draws her in just enough to keep control. And the next phrase he uses sounds like emotional maturity at first glance. But it's actually a trap. He says, "I'm not ready for anything serious." And yet, he calls you every day. He cuddles you like a boyfriend. He opens up about his childhood, his insecurities, his dreams. He introduces you to his friends. He tells you you're special, that he's never met anyone like you. But then, when the topic of commitment comes up, he reminds you he's not ready. He's not looking for anything serious right now. Do you see the contradiction? This isn't confusion, it's strategy. By telling you up front that he's not ready, he creates a safety net for himself. He gets to take everything you offer, your time, your body, your emotional support, without ever having to rise to meet your standards. And because he was honest, he gets to avoid all accountability. When you ask for more, he'll say, "But I told you from the beginning." Now you feel guilty for catching feelings, for wanting clarity, for wanting something real. But here's the truth. Any man who is consistent in his contact, deep in his conversations, present in your life, but still claims he's not ready, isn't confused. He's taking advantage. This dynamic is emotional manipulation in slow motion, because it keeps you in limbo, not fully loved, not fully abandoned, just close enough to stay hopeful, far enough to never feel safe. And the worst part, you begin to question yourself. You wonder if you're asking for too much, If you just wait longer, be more patient, love him harder, maybe he'll change. But you weren't made to be someone's emotional training ground. A woman rooted in her worth doesn't beg for readiness. She walks away the moment someone tells her they're unsure, because love that's real is never unsure. Now for the next phrase. This one doesn't come at the beginning of a relationship. It usually shows up after you've grown, after you've started speaking more boldly, dressing differently, chasing your goals, saying no more often. That's when he says it, quietly, critically, sometimes even tearfully. You've changed, but not with pride, with disappointment, with distance, as if who you're becoming is wrong, as if your evolution is betrayal. This is the most dangerous phrase a fearful man will ever say to a powerful woman, because it attacks your growth directly. It doesn't criticize your actions. It criticizes your becoming. It plants guilt in the soil of your transformation. Suddenly, you're wondering if you've become too cold, too distant, too ambitious, too assertive. You start looking at old versions of yourself and wondering if that's who he really loved. And now, without realizing it, you're negotiating with your own soul, asking it to shrink, to reverse, to stop evolving, just to feel loved again. But here's the truth. No one tells you. A man who truly loves you will never fear your evolution. He will honor it. He will hold space for the woman you're becoming, not cling to the woman you were when you didn't know your power. Because growth isn't a betrayal. It's the point. Relationships are meant to grow with you, not hold you hostage in your old self. I've seen women give up their dreams, their businesses, their friendships, their therapy, even their healing, just because a man said you've changed. And it crushed them, not because they were wrong to grow, but because they trusted someone who only loved them when they were easier to control. Let that sink in. He didn't love the real you. He loved the version of you that didn't challenge him, that didn't say no, that made herself smaller so he could feel big. That's not love. That's fear in disguise. So if you've heard that phrase recently, or ever, I want you to hear me loud and clear. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to become someone your old self wouldn't even recognize. That's what power looks like. That's what healing sounds. And any man who sees your growth and flinches isn't your future. He's your past, trying to hold on. In part 3, I'm going to show you how these 5 phrases create an energetic pattern and why recognizing it early could shift your entire life's direction. Because this isn't just about relationships, it's about your legacy. Stay with me. Now that you've heard the 5 phrases, you might be thinking, okay, I've heard these before. But what you might not realize is that when these phrases are combined over time, they create something far more dangerous than manipulation. They create an energetic pattern of self-erasure. And most women don't notice it until they've already dimmed their light so much they can't recognize themselves in the mirror. That's what we're diving into now, because this isn't just about bad communication. It's about your vibration, your identity, your sense of safety in your own truth. When a man says things like, "You're intimidating," "You don't have to prove anything," "I'm not ready for a relationship," "You've changed," or "You're being too much," what he's really doing is chipping away at the parts of you that are becoming stronger than his control. And if you're not aware, you'll start making small adjustments to yourself, not because you want to, but because part of you is trying to survive the relationship. You'll speak a little softer. You'll apologize before stating a boundary. You'll stop bringing up your wins because he never seems to celebrate them the way you hoped. You'll say, "It's okay," when it's not. You'll laugh off comments that make your stomach twist. You'll put your dreams on pause because he's not ready. And worst of all, you'll call it love, because we've been trained to confuse safety with approval and real connection with tolerating pain. But here's what I want you to understand. These 5 phrases aren't just red flags. They are warning signals from your nervous system. That tightness in your chest after he jokes about your attitude, that's not drama, that's data. That exhaustion you feel after trying to explain why a comment hurt you, that's not overreacting, that's your body signaling an energetic imbalance. Your intuition speaks through your body long before your brain can form a thought, and when you ignore that wisdom repeatedly, you disconnect from the one compass that can never be manipulated, your inner knowing. This is how the pattern begins. At first, it's emotional. You feel a little dismissed, a little confused. Then, it becomes mental. You start questioning if your expectations are unrealistic, if your tone was too sharp, if your success is intimidating. Then, it turns physical. You get more headaches. You sleep poorly. Your digestion suffers. Your shoulders ache from holding tension. You start skipping workouts, canceling plans, staying quiet to avoid another draining conversation. And finally, it becomes spiritual. You feel disconnected from yourself. You can't pray like you used to. You don't journal anymore. You forget the sound of your own voice when it wasn't being edited to keep someone comfortable. That's the price of tolerating a man who fears your power, not just your relationship. It's your peace, your health, your alignment. Because the longer you stay in spaces that dishonor your truth, the more you start believing your truth is too loud, too much, too inconvenient. And this belief doesn't just affect romance, it leaks into your work, your friendships, your vision. You become smaller across the board, not just with him. And what makes this so dangerous is that it doesn't happen in one moment. It happens over time, softly, silently, invisibly. That's why awareness is everything. Because the moment you start to notice how your energy shifts around certain people, you begin reclaiming your power. The moment you realize that love doesn't require self-abandonment, you stop mistaking emotional survival for connection. The moment you understand that protecting your energy is an act of sacred rebellion, you stop apologizing for making people uncomfortable with your boundaries. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt completely safe to be fully expressed in a relationship? Not just supported when convenient, but seen when you were messy, strong, loud, clear, angry, ambitious, sensitive, all at once. If that's hard to answer, you're not alone, because most women haven't experienced that yet. Not because they're not worthy of it, but because they've been taught to settle for men who prefer the watered-down version of them. But you're not here to be watered down. You're here to overflow. And any relationship, romantic or otherwise, that can't hold the fullness of your power isn't failing because you're too much. It's failing because it was never built to hold something as sacred as your becoming. You weren't born to fit into his idea of manageable. You were born to break generational patterns, to rise in your voice, and to be the first woman in your bloodline who didn't settle for being tolerated. In part 4, I'm going to show you what happens after you walk away from men who say these phrases: the fear, the guilt, the silence, and then the freedom, because breaking the pattern is only the beginning. Learning to live fully in your truth without looking back, that's the real revolution, and it's waiting for you. Let's talk about what happens after you walk away, because no one ever talks about that part. They tell you to leave the man who can't handle your power. They tell you to cut off the guy who called you too much. They tell you to protect your peace. And yes, that's part of it. But what they don't prepare you for is the emptiness that follows. The echo of silence, where chaos used to live. The stillness that feels both peaceful and terrifying. The voice in your head that whispers, "Did I make a mistake?" Let me tell you right now. No, you didn't. You didn't walk away from love. You walked away from manipulation, disguised as love. You walked away from being someone else's emotional cushion. You walked away from a life of almost, maybes and someday. And yes, it hurts. Not because you want him back, but because a part of you still wants to be chosen by someone who could never hold you. That's the paradox of power. You don't just lose a person, you lose the fantasy of who they could have been if they'd been strong enough to rise with you. And grieving that fantasy, that's real, it's valid. But don't let that grief convince you to go back. Because what you're really mourning is the version of yourself who stayed small to feel safe. And she deserves to be buried with grace, not resurrected out of guilt. In the days after leaving, you'll hear echoes of those phrases in your mind. You've changed. You're intimidating. You don't need to prove anything. They'll show up like ghosts, testing your resolve. And because you've been conditioned to second-guess yourself, you'll start to wonder, was I too harsh? Was I impatient? Should I have softened more? But pause, breathe. Ask yourself one simple question. Was I shrinking in that relationship? If the answer is yes, then walking away wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Because here's the part no one tells you after you walk away. There is a quiet war inside you. The part that was trained to earn love by sacrificing herself will scream for attention. She'll try to convince you that it's better to be half-loved than fully alone. She'll miss the good mornings, the texts, the comfort of being wanted, even if it was conditional. But I want you to hear me clearly. Comfort is not the same as peace. You were comfortable because you knew how to twist yourself to fit into his world. But peace comes when you stop contorting, when you stop performing, when you can exhale without wondering if your softness will be used against you tomorrow. And yes, after walking away, loneliness will visit you, but don't confuse loneliness with loss. You didn't lose something real. You released something that was keeping you from becoming real. You made space, and that space will feel empty at first, but only because you haven't yet filled it with the kind of connection that honors your entire being. You will, but only if you resist the urge to go back to what hurt you just because it's familiar. See, when a man fears your power, he doesn't just weaken you with words. He reshapes your reality. He trains you to believe that your strength is a liability, that your voice is dangerous, that your standards are walls. And walking away doesn't undo that programming overnight. It takes time. It takes unlearning. It takes standing in front of the mirror and saying, "No, I'm not too much. He was simply not enough." And here's the truth that will save you. Powerful women don't lose men like that. They release them. You didn't get left behind. You rose ahead, and it's not your job to wait for someone to catch up. It's your job to keep moving forward, even when it's lonely, even when it's quiet, even when no one claps for your boundaries. There will be nights where you cry. Let them come. There will be mornings where you doubt yourself. Let them pass. But never let a single memory make you forget why you left. Go back and read your own journal. Remember how small you felt, how tired you were, how many times you stayed silent just to keep the peace. That is not love. That is spiritual suffocation. And now, you've chosen air. You've chosen to breathe again. Because the truth is, when you walk away from the man who feared your power, you walk back into yourself, into your fire, into your purpose. And slowly, you start to remember who you were before someone convinced you that love was earned through endurance. You start to feel lighter, clearer, more connected to the woman you were always meant to be. In part 5, I'll show you how to rebuild from that space, how to move through the grief. Yes, but more importantly, how to reconnect with the version of you that doesn't apologize for existing in full volume. Because walking away was the first test, but learning to love yourself without needing someone else to validate it, that's the real initiation. Now that you've walked away, now that you've felt the silence, the grief, the strange peace that follows freedom, you've arrived at the most powerful and the most vulnerable part of your journey, the rebuild. This is where the world tries to pull you back into old patterns. This is where you'll be tempted by comfort, by attention, by empty affection, dressed up as second chances. But you didn't come this far just to play it safe again. You came here to rebuild, not the life you had, but the woman you were always meant to become. And it starts with one question: who am I when I'm no longer shrinking for love? You see, the old version of you, she lived for peacekeeping, for avoiding conflict, for being likable, for being chosen, even if it meant self-abandonment. But the woman you're becoming, she doesn't chase approval, she chases alignment. She doesn't tolerate low-effort affection, she requires reciprocity. She doesn't fear being alone, because she's finally learning what it means to be whole. But here's where it gets tricky. When a man fears your power and you leave, he might try to come back, not because he's grown, but because his control is slipping, and he knows how to say all the right things now. I miss you. You were right. I've changed. And a part of you will want to believe him, because when you're in the middle of rebuilding yourself, the temptation of instant relief can feel like love, but it's not. It's regression. And if you're not grounded in your truth, you'll accept apologies as proof of evolution. But don't confuse regret with transformation. This is the season where you protect your boundaries, like sacred gates, where you stop giving people access to you just because they remember your softness. Because healing requires discipline, not just in saying no to them, but in saying yes to the woman you're becoming. She's the one who deserves your loyalty now. She's the one who's been waiting for you to stop negotiating your worth. So how do you rebuild? You begin by reintroducing yourself to your own voice, not the one you used when you were trying to please him, not the one you softened so he wouldn't leave, but your true voice, the one that lives in your gut, not your fear. Start speaking from her, even if it's shaky, even if it sounds strange at first. Say what you mean, ask for what you want, state your needs like they matter, because they do. Then you reconnect with your body. Why? Because that's where your intuition lives. That's where you felt tightness when he gaslit you. That's where you felt the chills when something didn't sit right. That's where you felt the exhaustion from walking on eggshells. Your body isn't just a home, it's a compass. And when you spend enough time listening, it will tell you who is safe and who is not. Trust it again. You rebuild by creating a new standard for your relationships, one where love doesn't require guessing, where communication is clear, where your ambition is celebrated, not tolerated, where your no is heard the first time, where your silence isn't used against you, and your tears aren't dismissed as too much, and most importantly, where your evolution is welcomed, not feared. Because here's the thing, a powerful woman isn't defined by her ability to dominate. She's defined by her refusal to shrink, by her commitment to her truth, by her audacity to keep growing, even when it means outgrowing people she once prayed would stay. You don't need a relationship to prove your worth. You don't need his validation to reclaim your voice. You just need to stop betraying yourself to maintain connections that are already beneath your spirit. You rebuild by remembering the moments when your intuition whispered, "This isn't love." Remembering the strengths it took to walk away. Remembering how you always felt smaller around him, not because you were, but because he couldn't meet you at your fullness. And you remind yourself daily, that version of love is not coming with me into the next chapter. The next version of your life requires different choices, clearer boundaries, softer mornings, sharper discernment. You'll laugh again, deeper than before. You'll sleep better. You'll work with fire. You'll move through the world without explaining your joy. Because now, you're not seeking safety in others. You're becoming it for yourself. In part 6, the final chapter, I'll give you the truth that ties it all together. The truth about what happens after you've healed, after you've rebuilt, after you've reclaimed your worth. Because it's not just about leaving, it's about becoming someone who will never again accept the love that once made her question her own power. This is the final part, the one most women never get to, not because they're not capable, but because the world doesn't teach us how to live on the other side of healing. It teaches us how to survive heartbreak, how to crawl out of manipulation, how to start over. But no one teaches us how to exist fully as a woman who is no longer shrinking. No one tells us what life looks like when you no longer betray yourself for belonging. So that's what I'm here to give you, the truth about who you become. Not when he changes, not when he apologizes, not when you finally get chosen, but when you choose yourself over and over, until that becomes your default state of being. Because the most powerful thing a woman can do is not leave a man who fears her. It's becoming the kind of woman who never attracts him again. That starts when you stop confusing intensity with love, when you stop mistaking unpredictability for passion, when you stop settling for a connection that thrives only when you're bending to make it work, and instead, you start creating relationships that feel like clarity, like consistency, like peace. Not because you've become cold, but because you finally understand that the right man doesn't get activated by your light, he gets aligned with it. Let me be clear, the man who once feared your power will absolutely notice your glow when you stop trying to dim it for him. He may resurface, he may suddenly understand, he may try to prove that he's different now, but you'll feel it, not in his words, but in your body. Your nervous system will remember the tension, the silence, the way your shoulders used to rise when his name lit up your phone. And that's when you'll know, this is not yours anymore. He never feared your power, he feared your awareness. Because once a woman sees the truth, she becomes untouchable by anyone who thrived on her blindness. You'll realize something else too, that you no longer crave the things you used to beg for. You don't chase closure. You understand. You were always the ending. You don't chase being chosen. You choose yourself in rooms where your name was never spoken. You don't chase softness. You become the source of it in your own life. You don't apologize for your needs. You state them. You don't explain your standards. You embody them, and you do it without anger, without bitterness, without the need to prove anything to anyone. Because now, you don't just have power, you are power. And let me say this, especially to the woman who feels like her softness was shattered in the process. You can be powerful and soft. You can be grounded and passionate. You can be whole and still healing. These parts of you don't cancel each other out. They create balance. You don't have to become hard to be safe. You just have to become honest. Honest about who you are, what you want, what you will never again allow. When a man fears a powerful woman, he tries to cut her off from her essence. That's what those 5 phrases were always about. You're too much. You've changed. I'm not ready. You're intimidating. You don't have to prove anything. All of them had one goal: to separate you from your inner knowing. Because once you forget your own voice, you'll start listening to his. And once you believe his story about you, you'll start living it. But not anymore. Now, you write your own story. In this story, you don't prove your worth. It's inherent. You don't earn someone's love. It's mutual, or it's nothing. You don't tolerate confusion, you welcome clarity. You don't chase closure, you find it in your reflection. And when someone tries to love you small, you don't argue, you walk away, not with rage, with reverence. For the woman you've become, that's the final shift. You stop trying to make people see your value, and you start choosing people who already do, not just in romance, in friendship, in business, in family. You become a woman whose boundaries speak louder than her explanations, a woman whose energy does the filtering for her, a woman who no longer tolerates emotional crumbs, because she remembers what starvation felt like. And from that space, you attract the kind of love that doesn't ask you to change, shrink, or explain. It meets you eye level, hands open, ready. It sees you, not just the pretty parts, but the parts you used to hide. It honors your boundaries without complaint. It holds space for your evolution. It doesn't flinch when you speak with clarity. It celebrates your fire and respects your silence. What's waiting for you, not because you're perfect, but because you're aligned. So when a man fears a powerful woman, yes, he'll say those 5 phrases. But when a woman finally becomes powerful, she doesn't even hear them anymore, because she's no longer available for love that costs her her voice. You are not too much. You were never too loud, too confident, too honest, too passionate, too sensitive, too bold. You were only ever too powerful for someone who wasn't ready to rise. And now, you don't lower yourself. You rise anyway. You expand anyway. You speak anyway. And the right people, the ones who were always meant to walk with you, they'll meet you there, with love that doesn't require translation, and respect that doesn't come with condition. This is your reminder. You are the fire. You are the truth. You are the standard. And from this moment forward, you don't shrink for anyone. You burn brighter, because you were never meant to be dim.